Hello, and it's part four, hopefully the last part of our introduction to generative AI prompt engineering. And I'm in the last section, I hope. There's only 11 slides left, and we're talking about shot prompting, which is how many examples, building off of that last section, do you want to put into a prompt? This is not a straightforward answer. You would think that the answer I gave you earlier is an example. Hey, here's a couple examples, is it? But that's not actually the case. If you were to ask the different AI companies, they would all give you a different answer. Google, who has Gemini, OpenAI with Chat, and Anthropic, Claude, they all have in their prompt engineering documentation, or at least they did earlier this year, they had specific recommendations for what you're supposed to do, the best practice in terms of examples. You'll see the big ones: zero shot, which means don't give any examples, and few shot, which means give a couple examples, one or two. This may not make any sense right now, so let me explain a little bit more. So, zero shot prompting is a prompt without any examples. A bunch of the things that we've talked about in the first three videos up to this point are zero shot prompts. But the idea behind zero shot prompting is that you want to start ambiguous and you want to let the AI chatbot work with you to create something a little bit more creative and precise down the line. This leads to more back and forth. But at the same time, OpenAI likes to say that it's better when it's essentially like we want this to be a collaborative thing and not just you give chat instructions and chat gives you the output at the end. So when you start in general prompt without any examples and you're saying, hey, I want to create a social media strategy, chat's not just going to create you a social media strategy. It's going to ask you questions. It needs more information. Especially if you don't ask a question, you say like, let's build a social media strategy for my business together. Chat knows the questions to ask you. So you're going to get an output that's very ambiguous and generic. It will always require a follow-up. And again, that is what OpenAI says you should use for their product, which is Chat GPT. Then you have few shot prompting. This is what Google says. Now, what Google says is, hey, in your prompt, if you want something game ready, you need to give us some examples. And so it will say, okay, like put the details. What I would recommend is actually going back, looking at all the best practices, and then putting as many of those as you can into one prompt. Then at the end, include your 2 to 3 examples. This is good for writing a social media post, good for getting a draft of any messaging that you're going to send out through other communication means. And really, it might require some follow-up prompts like, hey, get rid of the hashtags, or hey, this needs a better hook, or no, I don't want any emojis. But overall, right, this is what Google recommends so that Gemini has a place to start from. But there's more. Multi-shot prompting is even more examples. So what Claude would say and what Anthropic wants is Claude and Anthropic, they pride themselves on being a little bit more ethical. They try not to be they want to be a little bit more mindful of the environment and all the computing power that Claude is taking up. I mean, that was kind of the idea behind how Anthropic got started when a guy left OpenAI to create this competitor. So they highly recommend multi-shot prompting. You can still get away with zero shot or few shot, and Claude will ask you follow-up questions. But in a perfect world, what they say is, hey, give as many examples as you got. The more examples you can give, the better off Claude can go through, look and see what it is that you're looking for, and then create an output that you are satisfied with. They claim that it shouldn't require follow-up prompts. A lot of times, and it does, but it's a good way to get you as far as you can up front. Finally, we have pre-written prompts. This is our last little section. Um, up to this point, I've talked way earlier. I talked a little bit about how you can provide a master prompt for your different platforms, and you can. And that's what we're going to talk about here. Is the last step. Usually, what you do is you go into your settings, and you'll see an option where you can provide instructions. In Claude, what I do is I create different projects for different clients, different accounts, and I provide separate instructions so that Claude knows what I'm working on when I create a new chat within that project. So the way I look at this is prompt engineering from a general platform level. This is where you can tell it like, hey, be don't just be a yes man. Don't just say yes to everything I say. Don't just agree with everything I say. Look at it a little bit more critically. Look at it from an academic perspective. Look at it from the perspective of a marketing executive. You can tell it to play different roles. You can add any of the best practices that we talked about in the last video. You can apply them to the master prompt. When you are looking at Claude, for example, right, you can select your work function. It's a drop down, and then you can include personal preferences. So that's kind of an option for what works there. But then you also have the pre-built stuff. These are the last couple slides. I specifically would like to talk about custom GPTs because there's more custom GPTs than custom connectors and projects and apps and all the others. And that's where it's essentially prompt engineering done for you for a very specific task. And there's very tailored instructions, prompts, there's an uploaded knowledge base. And it's interesting because there's a bunch out there. If you just go to search and you look at the custom GPTs, you'll see there's a ton. Some of them are really good, some of them are not. The way I really look at it is the ones that are listed at the top are probably the ones that are the best because that means they're being used a lot. But just remember, when you start, there are instructions. If you were to click one, you'll see, right, if I want a fully optimized article for search with FAQs, you will see those are all options, right? I want to generate a 2,000 word SEO article. I want to create a blog article with images. I want a multilingual one. There's options, but what it's going to do is you don't just click a button and it creates it for you. It then asks you questions. So if I clicked create a blog article with images, you will then see here's, what it needs from you in order to create it. And really what all this does is it creates a more user-friendly experience, and it's an option for you if you just want to bypass a lot of the prompt engineering to do something create something that's more general and straightforward. As it pertains to social media, there's a ton. There are a ton of custom GPTs. I don't really recommend any of them, to be honest. But all of custom GPTs are just prompt engineering done for you in such a way that it becomes a step-by-step list for you to answer and to get an output that you can use a little bit more than if you had started with the zero-shot prompt that OpenAI recommends that you start with anyways. And really, this is a place that I like to end because this custom GPT on the screen here is an example of like how far you can get with prompt engineering. This is where you get into more of the automation. This is where, down the line, you can, it's kind of like where we're at now with really best practices, where you can set up little projects and automated workflows so that different AI platforms can do something for you with one single question, one single statement, command, like create a blog article with images. We don't go through how to set that up in this course, but that is something to think about because, again, I don't use AI to automate stuff. I don't use it to automate social media. I use it to help brainstorm. I use it to help find things, find content, and not just that, but find content that's relevant to my niche. I'm using it to save time and I'm using it to save money. And for me, if you can do that, Prompt engineering should be able to do that for you down the line. It's not going to be something that you just learn instantly. It's not something you're going to be able to do instantly, but I hope it's something that, with a little bit of effort over the course of this course, you'll get a little better at, and you'll be able to be a little bit more efficient in your AI usage.